Morning, everybody. President Trump leaving this hour for a major international summit as the U.S. confronts big issues overseas and here at home, and there is a lot on the line. Good morning. I'm Bill Hemmer. It is Thursday inside of America's Newsroom. Big 3 hours. How are you?
Good morning, Bill. I'm Sandra Smith. The president packing in some high-level meetings with both China and Russia as the world awaits some big decisions from our commander-in-chief. Meanwhile, here at home, lawmakers facing an intensifying border wall funding battle and growing drama over the Mueller investigation.
So Griff Jenkins live back on the border with Mexico. Chris Starwalt has analysis on all of this. But first, White House correspondent Kevin Corke live in Argentina, where the president will arrive a bit later today. Kevin, let's start there with you. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Now, as you can imagine, there's a great deal of anticipation ahead of this important summit, but maybe not for all the reasons that you might otherwise expect. Now, it is clear there's a hope, certainly, and an expectation that this will prove to be a much more collaborative gathering among the nations and the world's leaders, for that matter, especially when compared to both the G7 and the NATO summits. As you know, we saw certainly in both occasions the president proving both his political independence and his willingness to disrupt the status quo. Now, of note this particular time, whether or not the planned bilateral with Russian President Vladimir Putin will in fact take place, and whether or not it will produce anything of value. That meeting, as you know, takes on added significance, Bill, given the Kremlin's recent attack on a Ukrainian vessel. The Ukrainians, in fact, are now asking NATO warships to patrol that part of the globe. And there is, of course, the 800-pound elephant in the room. That, of course, being the ongoing trade battle between the world's two largest economies, the United States and China. What might the Trump-Xi Jinping bilateral produce? The hope is there will be progress. But frankly, Bill, there is pessimism here if you read the local papers, given the president's insistence that the playing field be level between the U.S. and Beijing. Let me take you to Twitter. The president actually weighing in on this topic. He said this: billions of dollars are pouring into the coffers of the USA because of the tariffs being charged to China. And there is a long way to go. Sort of tipping his hand there as you look at that tweet. He continues by saying this: if companies don't want to pay tariffs, build in the USA. Otherwise, let's just make our country richer than ever before. We have all that plus the ongoing question about the Brexit vote and its impact not only in the UK's economy, Bill, but also on the standing of British Prime Minister Theresa May. So much more to get to. Of course, we'll have you covered here with live coverage throughout. But for now, back to you.
Good deal. Thank you, Kevin. Nice to see you there in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Thank you, Kevin. Sandra.
Meanwhile, a troubling situation unfolding on our southern border. At this hour, we're hearing now more than 2,200 migrants are being treated for health-related issues, as we learn that there are at least 600 known criminals traveling in that caravan. Griff Jenkins is live on the border in Tijuana, Mexico, with the latest there. Griff, good morning.
Good morning, Sandra. It is alarming news we're getting from Tijuana's health department yesterday. Before I give you those numbers, though, let me just show you for the 6,000 plus migrants that are in this cramped tent city, that tent, that little white tent attached to a small camper, is the extent of the health services available from Tijuana's municipal health department. And the numbers are alarming. Take a look at these. Of the 2,267 migrants that have been treated so far, we know that over 60% have respiratory infections. There are 3 confirmed cases of tuberculosis. There are 4 cases of HIV/AIDS, 101 cases of lice, and 4 cases of chicken pox. And hepatitis is a real concern here as well because of the overcrowding and unsanitary conditions. It's been raining all night, expected to rain all day. The migrants are cold, wet, and suffering from colds, and it is creating a situation of frustration, not only because of the fact that they're very sick right now, but also because they believe they were lied to by organizers who told them it was going to be much easier to get across to the U.S. Marco Munoz is one of those migrants from Honduras who told me that they're worried we may be headed towards a breaking point. Take a listen.
They lied to us from the beginning. So most of these people are disappointed, and getting frustrated at the time. So as you can see, every day that passes, it's more and more people that are coming. So there's going to be a point break where they're just going to say, let's just rush in there,
And we're hearing that there may be we're hearing there may be an effort to move some of these folks to another location to create a spot with more space. We'll find out if that happens. We're also hearing of a potential march amongst the migrants here. Of course, the last time there was a march on Sunday, it turned violent and was a bad situation. We'll find out. The situation's fluid, but one thing's for sure, these migrants are not healthy. Sandra?
Griff Jenkins, thank you.
Oftentimes the situations grow dire before they get better. For more on all this, I want to bring in Chris Steyerwalt, Fox News digital policy editor. How you doing, buddy? Good morning to you. We can talk about immigration. I mean, you can throw a dart at the board today, but when you think about the president leaving this hour for Argentina, oftentimes these trips don't amount to much, Chris. But there are big targets here. China and Russia and Ukraine. So what's a good case scenario? What does the White House get from this trip?
So the G20 hasn't amounted to much over history. This was a response to the financial crisis. This is too big of a group to functionally do anything. When we think about groups that do stuff, it's usually 3 or 4 countries working together, maybe 7. What this offers for the president, what this offers for this administration, though, is what can he do piece by piece, leader by leader, as he goes through. How does he respond to Putin? Putin has been totally unchecked. He is doing whatever he pleases. He is acting, you would almost say rashly, or at least like a man who's afraid that he's not going to face any consequences for these bad acts. So you have that part. Remember, they were trying to interfere with our midterm elections. They are acting provocatively with Ukraine. They are doing all of those things. So he's got that piece. Then he's got the China piece. So far, China has walked slow. They have not overreacted or been intense in their response to Trump's tariffs, but it's hurting them. And pretty soon they're going to have to take some action.
Okay, here on the tariffs, here's the tweet, guys, from the president. Billions of dollars, he writes, are pouring into the coffers of the USA because of the tariffs being charged at China, and there's a long way to go. If companies don't want to pay tariffs, build in the USA. Otherwise, let's just make our country richer ever than before. There is a long way to go. That's the sentence that sticks out in my mind. I don't know in this meeting on Saturday night as to whether or not they come out with a joint statement that says they're working toward a resolution, or whether or not this could go on for months. And my guess right now, it's the latter, Chris.
The Chinese are patient players. We know that. They do not act rashly, and they probably have been waiting to see whether domestic pressure on the president or an economic turndown or what happens with the U.S. economy. The other thing I would say is, if all these billions of dollars are pouring into our coffers as a consequence of these tariffs, why are we still running trillion-dollar deficits? My goodness, the federal balance sheet is so far out of whack, it's ridiculous. Holy crocono.
There it is. Sometimes it is said that it's good to get outside the D.C. bubble. And oftentimes that's healthy for a president who gets himself locked into that environment there. But when he comes home, he's still going to have this Mueller matter, et cetera. And this was his latest message on that. Did you ever see an investigation more in search of a crime, he writes. At the same time, Mueller and the Democrats aren't even looking at the atrocious and perhaps subversive crimes that were committed by crooked Hillary Clinton, the Democrats, a total disgrace. So he has that to come back to. Is it good to get out of the bubble, Chris, for a bit?
Well, yesterday on Twitter, he was saying he was going to lock up Mueller and they're going to imprison all these people for treason, including, for some reason, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I don't know what she did. But anyway, there's the Twitter Trump where he says this stuff for his base to make sure that he keeps them white-hot hatred for Mueller and the deep state and the conspiracy theories and this stuff. And then there's the stuff that he says when he does interviews with people like Chris Wallace. And he talks to the rest of the country, the 70% of the country, when he says, I'm not going to fire Mueller. Everything is going according to plan. This is all fine. So it's the two messages. It's the one for his devotees, and it's one for the rest of the country.
Okay. You sound like some crocono in your voice.
I've been hanging out with the caravan. I got it from Griff. I got you.
Senator Kennedy on immigration from Martha last night. Watch here. Roll it and listen.
The insider elites and the nature cure quacks up here in D.C. lecture the president every day about the rule of law. And yes, the rule of law is important. But how come it doesn't apply to those who are trying to break our immigration laws? I mean, you could drown in the hypocrisy.
Get a quick word on this as to whether or not you think there could be some sort of deal cut between the Senate and the House on that funding bill, Chris.
The obliviousness of Democrats on this subject, their inability to understand how this not only reinforces the president's point, but undercuts their own on immigration, means that they're not likely to come to the table because they don't understand how they're being disadvantaged. They don't know how this is hurting them, so I don't think they're able to really talk turkey yet.
Oh, thank you, sir. We'll talk to you real soon. Chris Starwell there. We got a lot coming up on all this coming up today. Our headliner, former Deputy National Security Advisor Michael Anton is here today. Looking forward to hearing from him again. Also from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency, Pete Flores is live and next hour here in America's Newsroom. A lot on the table. Smitty, you think about the headlines from this weekend. I mean, they could be fast and furious with regard to Russia and Vladimir Putin, that meeting, the meeting with President Xi on Saturday night. So stand by.
All of this as we await the departure of the president a short time from now, where he could weigh in on any of this if he takes questions from reporters, so we'll wait on that. Plus, there's this brand new reaction coming into our newsroom this morning from President Trump on those layoffs at General Motors, what he is now saying about the American car maker. Plus this.
We have no smoking gun that the Crown Prince was involved, not the intelligence community or anyone else. There is no smoking gun.
There was a big briefing yesterday. Some of these lawmakers not happy with what they heard. We will find out in a moment from Senator John Barrasso about that closed-door hearing that has sparked a wave of bipartisan outrage. Senator Barrasso is coming up live in a moment.
And could stalled judicial nominees force Republican leaders to take up a vote on protecting the special counsel, Robert Mueller? We are going to hear from the lawmaker who stopped the bill dead in its tracks yesterday. Senator Mike Lee will join us. But first, here's Sarah Sanders.
The president has had Robert Mueller doing his job for the last 2 years, and he could have taken action at any point, and he hasn't. So we'll let that speak for itself. He has no intent to do anything.
Fox News alert: the Pentagon releasing the names of 3 U.S. service members killed in a roadside bombing in Afghanistan Tuesday. 29-year-old Army Captain Andrew Ross, 39-year-old Army Sergeant First Class Eric Emmond, and 25-year-old Air Force Staff Sergeant Dylan Elchin. The Taliban claiming responsibility. It was the deadliest attack on American troops in Afghanistan this year.
They're considering debating a resolution on the Senate floor, which we think is just poorly timed. There is no direct reporting connecting the Crown Prince to the order to murder Jamal Khashoggi.
I changed my mind because I'm pissed. The way the administration's handled the Saudi Arabia event is just not acceptable. The briefing today did not help me at all. Institutionally, we have a right to be briefed by the CIA. How can I make an informed decision as a United States Senator about whether or not the Crown Prince is complicit in a murder if I don't have access to the intelligence that I read about in the paper?
Members of this body have a right to hear from Director Haspel, and her absence today speaks volumes about the White House's intention for congressional oversight and Saudi Arabia.
Just some of the reaction we're getting from the Hill. High-stakes closed-door briefing on Saudi Arabia. It happened yesterday with James Mattis and Mike Pompeo. One of the senators in that meeting is with me now, Senator John Barrasso, the Republican from Wyoming. And, sir, welcome back here to America's Newsroom.
Thanks, Bill. Great to be with you.
Take us inside the room. What was the message?
Sure. Well, there was 100% agreement of 100 senators that the death and the murder of Jamal Khashoggi was brutal, was ruthless, and was against American values. We had the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense, but not the CIA director. Many people wanted the CIA director to be there so she could be questioned directly. But there was also 100 senators who believed, whether there was a smoking gun or not, that if a gun were to be found, it would be the fingerprints of the Crown Prince on that gun. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that he was involved, and the question then is, what do you do about it? And I think we have to absolutely condemn the behavior of Saudi Arabia in this case. This is against our values. We have to strongly explain our values to the world, but also we need to keep the agreement going, working with the Saudi Arabia. They are a source of stability in that part of the world. And some of the hypocrisy out there, Bill, are the Democrats that say, well, we should be doing more with diplomacy in that part of the world. But yet they have been holding up President Trump's nominee to be the Assistant Secretary of State, David Schenker, for that part of the world for 7 months now.
So the administration's position is that they're going to go forward with the relationship with Saudi Arabia. That's what I take away from this. And Gina Haspel was not there. I was just wondering if that would have swayed some of those in the room. Would that have been a better deal, do you think, for those? Because you had a vote after the 63-37, 2-1, to cut support to Saudi Arabia for that war in Yemen. You were one who voted against that resolution. How come?
Yes, I voted against it. I think we need to continue the relationship, continue what we're doing. I believe it's important to get our Assistant Secretary and Ambassador on the ground there. I think had the director of the CIA been there, I don't think it would have changed the outcome. So people that want to point to that as a reason, I don't think is a justifiable reason. Long term, we need the relationship with Saudi Arabia as in terms of what Iran is doing. Iran continues to fund the Houthis in Yemen who are attacking Saudi Arabia. They're funding these folks with money that the United States gave Iran as part of this Iran nuclear deal. So I think there's bad actors all around. Our source of stability in the Middle East is Saudi Arabia.
You accept the argument Mike Pompeo makes that there is a lot of tough actors in that part of the world, and at some point you have to deal with them. Is this just, are you telling the American people that they just have to swallow hard on this aspect of the story with Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think we need to should have been much more forceful in condemning what has been done. You take a look and you say, is this 31-year-old the right person, the Crown Prince, to be leading that country? Are there changes that may be made internally in Saudi Arabia to change leadership? All of those things I think are important. But I think that what we are doing now in our long-term relationship to Saudi Arabia is important. I also think what President Trump is doing with energy in America is important. So we're not dependent on anyone in that part of the world for energy, and we're more relying on American energy.
These waters run deep. And quickly, I just want to get to another big story, and that's this 2-hour meeting with Vladimir Putin that's scheduled for Saturday. James Mattis, you've got the whole conflict with Russia provoking Ukraine in the last week. Here's what James Mattis said about that yesterday.
It was obviously a flagrant violation of international law. It was, I think, a cavalier use of force when you think that there is a treaty between the two countries that permits exactly what happened. It just shows that Russia cannot be counted on right now to keep its word.
You can make the argument that Putin's trying to test this administration yet again. What comes of this meeting, Senator?
Well, I think much more important than the meeting is what we, the United States, actually do in the area. And I suggest that we actually send ships to the Black Sea to send a message to Ukraine that we are with them, and to send a message to Russia that international law must be followed. Look, Vladimir Putin is a show, not tell guy. You can tell him anything you want. He respects power and he respects geography. And what he's doing in the area of Ukraine is actually a fight for more geography. He takes it any time he tries to do it. He is testing the United States and the resolve of NATO.
Yeah, Senator, thank you for your time. We got some breaking news. Sorry to cut you off. Hope you come
Thanks for
back,
having
okay?
me.
John Barrasso, thank you, the senator from Wyoming.
Meanwhile, this just coming in from the Associated Press, Michael Cohen, President Trump's ex-lawyer, is making a surprise court appearance this morning before a federal judge in New York. According to some of the latest reports on this right now, Bill, Michael Cohen made a surprise appearance in a Manhattan courtroom to plead guilty to a new criminal charge, which of course would be the latest turn in the special counsel's investigation of the president and his inner circle. So we're just starting to get reports on this now.
Just wonder how this case is changing if the surprise appearance is happening now, Sandra, because 2 weeks from now, Cohen, age 52, was scheduled to be in court to be sentenced for an earlier guilty plea, and that case included bank and tax crimes and was brought by federal prosecutors here in New York City. This is the district court here in New York City, where a lot of people, including Alan Dershowitz, think the real legal action is. So we'll see what happens here with Cohen showing up today.
We will likely have much more on this coming up for you in a few moments. Stay tuned. Keep it right here on America's Newsroom. We'll be right back.
I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see.
25 past the hour now. I want to get back to this breaking news. We're getting word we got a producer inside the courtroom in Lower Manhattan where Michael Cohen has made a surprise appearance. According to the Associated Press, there's one line crossing right now, pleading guilty to lying to Congress, according to the AP, about a Trump real estate project in Russia. Now, remember, Cohen, the former lawyer for the president, pleaded guilty back in August to breaking some sort of campaign finance laws, made a surprise appearance earlier today. This about 2 weeks prior to a scheduled appearance. He was expected in court on the 12th of December for a sentencing part of his case. So how that's impacted based on today's appearance, we do not know, but the case then involved bank and tax crimes brought by federal prosecutors here in New York City. This goes with all the news that's surrounding Paul Manafort. When the Mueller team came out, according to reports, and accused Manafort of lying. At the same time, there was an accusation that Manafort had met with Julian Assange in London, and Manafort's team came out and blasted that, said it was not true at all. So this is going back and forth at a time when Rudy Giuliani confirmed to John Roberts and others that apparently at the White House that the lawyer for Paul Manafort has been communicating with Rudy Giuliani, and some legal experts suggest that's not unusual, but to get an idea as to where Bob Mueller is going in his investigation. That'd be very valuable legal information for the president's team.
And remember, Michael Cohen's promised to put family and country first by cooperating with prosecutors. So a lot we don't know at this point. What we do know is that he is currently in that courtroom. We've got a producer there sending reporters down to the courthouse as well, that Michael Cohen is expected to plead guilty to a charge in the Mueller investigation. And as you noted, Bill, the latest crossing the AP, is expected to plead guilty to lying to Congress about a Trump real estate project in Russia. And this would, of course, mark the first time that the Office of the Special Counsel has charged Cohen in exchange for pleading guilty and continuing to cooperate with Mueller. He may be obviously hoping to receive a lighter sentence than he otherwise would have.
It'd be a good day to get people like Alan Dershowitz on the air. We'll reach out to him and see what he thinks about this right now as we try and piece together the legal case right now and where this could be headed by the end of the day today, Sandra.
All right. And by the way, we are expecting the president to be departing en route to the G20 summit at the top of the next hour. We were anticipating that he could stop and talk to reporters, answer questions, as he sometimes and often does. This makes 10 o'clock even more important because he may stop and respond to all of this. So we await the president's departure at the top of the hour as well.
Also, we're getting this reaction, too, from the president. We read this tweet about 30 minutes ago. Did you ever see an investigation more in search of a crime? He wrote earlier today. At the same time, Mueller and the angry Democrats are not even looking at the atrocious and perhaps subversive crimes that were committed by crooked Hillary Clinton and the Democrats. A total disgrace. That from earlier.
He also tweeted, when will this illegal Joseph McCarthy-style witch hunt, one that's shattered so many innocent lives, ever end, or will it just go on forever after wasting more than $40 million? Is that possible? It's proven only one thing: there was no collusion with Russia. So ridiculous. Those tweets came out before we learned of this surprise Michael Cohen appearance at a courthouse in Manhattan.
Michael Cohen, age 52. We'll see what comes of that right now inside before that judge, Sandra.
All right. In the meantime, we move on to this, and we'll have a lot more coming up, by the way, in just a few moments on that. To another big story that we're watching at this hour: retiring House Speaker Paul Ryan urging Democrats to get on board and fully fund that border wall as a matter of national security. President Trump says anything less than $5 billion for that wall, for his flagship wall, as he might shut down the government over it. Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Anthony Brown of Maryland. Congressman, first time on the program, thank you for joining us this morning. Good to have you. So what can you tell us about Democrats' willingness to work with Republicans on this issue?
Look, I don't think it's just a matter of the Democrats' unwillingness to fund the border wall at $5 billion, but Republicans are unable to do that in the Senate. You know, as you know, as has been reported on, the president campaigned on a border wall that would be paid for by the Mexican government. So there's really no appetite for $25 million, let alone $5 billion, I should say, for a border wall. I think Democrats are willing to talk about enhanced border security, whether it's nominal physical barriers, whether it's more human resources on the border, but a $5 billion wall just isn't going to cut it.
But this is the new Congress, and you know, obviously right now there's votes on the leadership of Democrats in the House, and Paul Ryan making the case that this shouldn't be a Republican issue, this shouldn't be a Democrat issue, this should be an American issue. We're talking about border security here. So I just wonder what you are willing to do as a party on border security. Where are you willing to move, as most Americans see something has to be done?
Look, I think in that regard, Speaker Ryan has it right. Border security is an American issue, not just a Democrat or Republican, but so is comprehensive immigration reform. So what we're willing to do is to talk about appropriate levels of border security, looking at comprehensive immigration reform. Who can we let into our country? How does it strengthen our economy? How do we allow for family reunification? How do we maintain that commitment to those who are seeking asylum and refuge in our country? They've done it for centuries. We shouldn't cut that off. So there's a lot going on when we're talking about border security and immigration reform.
And obviously Nancy Pelosi clearing her first major hurdle in becoming House Speaker. A lot of news there. Congressman, we've got a lot of breaking news this morning, as you noted, as we led into you with that. We've got to get back to that. Congressman, please come back. Thank you for being on the program this morning.
Thank you.
All right.
Back to Michael Cohen, appearing in Southern at this hour. What this is about is not clear, but some of the reports we're getting right now suggest that he's reached some sort of tentative deal with Bob Mueller. That deal's apparently, according to the AP, was some sort of real estate deal in Russia with the president. So he is before a judge, federal court in Manhattan, where he is expected to enter a guilty plea from his statements to Congress. So that happened in some sort of closed-door testimony about a year ago. Alan Dershowitz by telephone. Sir, good morning to you. We're trying to read between the lines here. What does this tell you, sir? Professor, if you can hear me, it's Bill Hemmer. We're live on TV. Good morning, sir.
Hello?
Yeah, Alan Dershowitz. Hey, you're live on the air. Thanks for the quick work and picking up the phone. I just want to get a sense from you as to what the legal situation might be for Michael Cohen at this hour.
Well, I think the change is that Michael Cohen previously was cooperating with the Southern District of New York, which meant cooperating primarily about Mr. Trump's pre-presidential business activities, which is what the Southern District is looking into. This looks like he's now possibly cooperating with the Mueller report, which raises two questions. Number one, it means the Mueller report is not yet ready to go. It means that they're probably still doing some investigation. They're perhaps trying to fill some blanks because they've lost Manafort as a witness, and of course he is unlikely to be a witness. And the story in The Guardian about members of the administration having contact with Assange seems to be falling apart. So I think they're probably hustling to try to get a new witness who could fill some of those gaps. That's
Okay, I know what your position is on the special prosecutor. You think it's out of bounds. You, however, has said repeatedly that legally speaking, the Southern District is where the action is. Why?
Well, I've always thought that because as far as Mueller is concerned, all of the allegations are constitutionally protected by the president. The president is entitled to have interactions with foreign countries. If he did, there's no evidence to suggest that he did. And he's certainly entitled to pardon, fire, have impact on the administration of justice. Those are his constitutional powers under Article 2.
I don't know if that continues. Perhaps that has changed significantly because of this news now. But remember, he pled guilty to this campaign finance law back in August. So he pled guilty to a new criminal charge. And you just stated that what that suggests to you is that the Mueller matter is far from over or far from conclusion. But Mueller took the Cohen matter out of the special prosecutor realm in Washington, D.C. and moved it to New York. Why would that be?
Oh, I think because people were questioning his jurisdiction and whether he had gone too far beyond the original mandate if he's looking into anything that's kind of financial. And that's why I think he gave that matter over to the Southern District.
Professor Dershowitz, is there anything that can be determined about Cohen's cooperation and whether this will ultimately lead to other criminal allegations?
You know, we can't be sure. He may be separately sentenced on the two things he pleaded guilty to. We're just not sure. He has good lawyers, and apparently he's still playing ball with the prosecutor, unlike Manafort. So it remains to be seen what information he provides. Remember, he, too, it's hard to use him as a witness because he's had a history of questionable conduct. I think they're going to look to see if they can get from him information that could be corroborated or information that may lead to other self-proving information. That's the way prosecutors usually operate.
Professor Dershowitz, thank you for jumping on the phone with us this morning on this breaking news.
Thank you.
We want to get to Senator Mike Lee. He's standing by. Senator Mike Lee, you've been following every bit of the Mueller investigation through this process. You just heard from Alan Dershowitz. He believes that this indicates that there's no indication right now that the Mueller probe is wrapping anytime soon.
Perhaps there's no indication of that. I hope that it is wrapping soon. This has been going on for the better part of 2 years, and I want him to finish his work, and I think he ought to wrap it up soon.
This changes things, obviously, based on what we're learning right now. The fact that Michael Cohen's expected to plead guilty to making false statements to Congress on the Russia probe. We're waiting to hear more. We understand he is in that courtroom right now. How does this change the way you and your colleagues look at this probe?
I don't think it changes anything about how I look at the probe. I certainly don't think it changes anything about how I look at the Flake-Coons bill that would try to create a de facto fourth branch of government unanswerable to the President of the United States, operating outside of the separation of power system established by our Constitution. I still oppose that. Nothing about that changes. And I don't think anything about this latest development also necessarily indicates that the Mueller probe has to last much longer.
What you ahead of departing for the G20 summit, talking about this investigation, how it's more in search. Have you ever seen one more in search of a crime? It's calling it a total disgrace. This illegal one that shattered so many innocent lives and go on forever. So ridiculous. The president has been tweeting this morning about this. This is the president ahead of us learning the latest on Michael Cohen in that courtroom this morning.
Yeah, so the president made those statements ahead of this happening. I didn't see this coming. I doubt the president did, but still, I don't think this necessarily extends the period of time that Mueller has to run his operation. I think he should be nearing the end of his investigation. I look forward to seeing his report, and I hope he's ready to wrap it up.
Yeah, and as far as what we are learning here, he's pleading guilty to lying to Congress about work that he did on a Trump real estate deal in Russia. And this comes as the president is about to depart. Top of the hour, Senator Mike Lee. Obviously, we plan to talk about other things, having you on the program this morning. But we could hear from the president at the top of the hour. What would your expectations be as the leader of your party, as the leader of the country, as he is about to go meet with major world leaders? We could hear the president weigh in on this and a lot of other things at the top of the hour.
Yeah, we could hear him weigh in on this. We could also hear him weigh in on other important matters facing the country. I look forward to hearing from him on developments on trade. Look forward to hearing from him also on criminal justice reform, something that the president has proudly championed. As the leader of the Republican Party, he's been behind this effort to get the First Step Act passed by Congress. We need this to pass because it will make the American people safer. It'll make our criminal justice system more effective and more efficient. And I applaud the president's efforts in this area.
All right. Well, I know all of this breaking news is breaking news to you as you jumped onto the program with us. We're going to get back to Alan Dershowitz in just a second. But if I could, Senator Lee, just have you sort of wrap things up here as you and members of Congress get back to work this week, just sort of the mood, the tone on Capitol Hill this morning.
Well, the mood and the tone on Capitol Hill this morning is that there's a lot we want to accomplish between now and the end of this Congress, which expires at exactly noon on January 3rd of 2019. We've got judges to confirm. We've got a criminal justice bill to pass. We've got a government to fund. We look forward to getting it done.
All right. We've got a lot of breaking news this morning. We appreciate your time. Senator Mike Lee, thank you.
Thank you.
This is what we're getting from the Associated Press. Cohen's surprise appearance before that judge, Southern District, Manhattan, around 9 a.m. earlier today, admitted to making false statements in 2017 to a U.S. Senate Select Committee on Intel about a plan to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. Frankly, that is the only line on the Associated Press that's given us a clue as to what this is about. Back to Professor Dershowitz. Good morning again, sir. You made a comment a moment ago about the conflicted statements Michael Cohen has been through over the past year and a half. Do you believe legally he's a good witness, sir?
Well, legally, he's already, now he's admitting to making false statements, so his credibility as a witness diminishes. The question is whether he has information that might contradict what others have said about buildings in Moscow, or whether or not that constitutes any kind of criminal activity. I find that very hard to find. What's happening is the special prosecutor is making all of his cases based on false statements. It's interesting. In other parts of the world, you can't even prosecute people for that. But practically the entire series of indictments grows out of false statements rather than any substantive charges. Because, for example, hypothetically, if they were building buildings or planning to build buildings in Russia, surely that wouldn't be a crime. But lying about it might be a crime. So we're seeing many of these cases being built around false statements.
Mm-hmm. Before the Thanksgiving break, we were told to the White House the president submitted his written answers to Bob Mueller. Could that have an impact on what we're seeing here, or do you believe they're in different silos, sir?
Yes, I think it could. I think, as I said even before the president gave his answers, they're going to comb through every one of his answers and see if they can come up with anybody who can contradict anything the president said. That's why it's called a perjury trap, because even if the president believes what he said was true, if somebody will contradict it, then the president can be charged with lying to government officials, which is, the equivalent of perjury. So that's why it's so dangerous for anybody who is the subject of an investigation to answer questions by the prosecution, because the prosecution then combs through evidence, tries to get evidence that they can then use to show contradiction.
Mm-hmm. What is your reaction to the report of yesterday that Kevin Downing, the attorney for Paul Manafort, has been in contact with Rudy Giuliani, representing the president clearly, and for lack of a better
nothing
phrase,
wrong with that from the president's point of view. Any good lawyer tries to reach out to witnesses. Side, perfectly legitimate to do it. In fact, it's illegal for a prosecutor to say to one of his witnesses that you can't talk to lawyers for the other side. The question is, was it smart for Manafort and his lawyer to do that? And maybe not so smart, because look what happened. The plea deal imploded, and now he's going to get sentenced even more harshly than he would have had he made no deal.
Yeah. My question was not based on something that was done illegally. If you're a lawyer, you want to gather as much information as possible. If I were Rudy Giuliani, I'd want to talk with Kevin Downing, find out what Mueller's asking and what questions he has, sir.
And that's entirely legitimate. In fact, it's almost mandatory. Any good lawyer should do anything he can that's ethical and legal to try to find out as much as possible about the case that's being built against his client.
You mentioned the perjury trap, sir. Do you think that all of these cases are based on that? Meaning,
I think a lot of them are. I think the weakness of Mueller's substantive findings are suggested by the fact that he has to resort to false statement prosecutions, which really shows that he didn't start with very much. That the very fact that he's conducting an investigation has created these crimes. These are not crimes that had been committed prior to his appointment. They're crimes that were committed as the result of his appointment. And that, raises some questions about the role of special prosecutors in creating crimes or creating opportunities for crimes to be committed. In the end, I don't think Mueller is going to come up with very much in terms of criminal conduct that existed before he was appointed. And that's quite shocking.
Yeah, well, that's a very low legal bar. For example, I ask you about a date and you get the date wrong. I ask you about an email, you get the email wrong. That would be under the definition perjury.
Yeah. Well, technically, it has to be willful and knowing and deliberate. But that puts the burden really on the defendant to show that he made a mistake rather than lied. And that's sometimes hard to do.
Sir, stand by. Thank you very much, Professor Alan Dershowitz, by telephone. Back with more on Sandra.
Rick Leventhal is outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan right now, where Michael Cohen's expected to plead guilty to misleading Congress about the Russia probe. What more are we learning outside the courthouse there, Rick?
Well, we're learning apparently that this hearing is now over. What I'm told, and what the Associated Press is reporting, is that this was in regard to false statements that Michael Cohen now admits he made to the Senate Select Intelligence Committee that was investigating the potential collusion with Russia, and also this issue of the president, back when he was not the president, trying to cut a deal to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. We just got down here to the courthouse. You can see a lot of crews out front. And we had a producer in the courtroom, Tamara Gitt, who just came running out of the courtroom. And Tamara, I know you don't like to normally do this, but please just come in here for a second. We want to hear what happened in the courtroom and what Michael Cohen had to say in the courtroom.
Absolutely. So Michael came in a little after 9 with his attorney, Guy Petrillo. He looked to be in a good mood. He was smiling. He was even talking to the government attorneys and smiling and talking to his attorneys. And he pled guilty to one count of providing false statements to this special counsel. He said he fully understood what he was doing. He was waiving his right to an indictment by a grand jury, but he pled guilty to the one count.
And his demeanor was happy.
I would say, yeah, he was calm. He was smiling. He recognized some of us in the press, smiled at me in the jury box because he's seen me before. And he seemed to be in a calm